A grandfather killed in his house in Oregon.
The victim was on the back porch. I had been told that a woman had possibly shot her husband.
The evidence appears to point to a tragic accident.
There's really no sign of any struggle.
A lot of mistakes happen in the dark. You can stub your toe or end up accidentally killing your husband.
I was trying to kill myself.
But when details fail to add up, detectives begin to suspect a cold-blooded murder.
In the bottom of a laundry hamper was a foreclosure notice.
She had built a house of cards on lies and deception.
And information from beyond the grave reveals the killer's deceit.
Well, looking through this office, we come across this notebook.
The last thing he writes is, maybe I'll be on my own.
The little lies turn into big lies, turn into how do I get out of this?
Millersburg, Oregon is a town of about 3,000 people halfway between Portland and Eugene.
It's a small city in Linn County that really doesn't have much crime, much burglary, much theft, hardly any major crime.
In the early morning hours of November 16th, 2015, this normally quiet community awakens to the sound of sirens as local sheriffs respond to a frantic 911 call.
My husband has been shot.
He's been shot?
Yes.
Ma'am, can you take a deep breath and tell me what happened?
I can't tell you. I don't know. He wasn't supposed to be here.
Okay, we're going to get help sent that way, okay? Stay on the line with me.
Deputies quickly arrive at the home of Ken and Roberta Samard, a couple in their late 50s and early 60s.
When police arrive on the scene, it's still dark outside. It's early morning hours.
They encountered Roberta. She was in the house, still on the phone with 911. They brought her out to the front porch.
They start talking to Roberta. She seems a little out of it. She is telling them, I did it, I shot my husband. But she had planned to die by suicide. Her husband, he was gonna leave for work and had at some point come back in and interrupted Roberta's plan to take her life. She happened to accidentally shoot him.
Roberta is taken into custody and held in the back of their patrol car while detectives arrive on scene.
I got paged out that a shooting that had occurred in Millersburg, which was only 5 to 7 minutes away from my house. As you walk in the front door, there's a glass door that leads out onto a wood porch. The victim, Ken Samard, was on the back porch. It was pretty easy to tell he was deceased. The gun was inside the threshold near that door. It was a pretty unique gun, like a snub-nosed .38 stainless steel, but it had pink grips on it. From the looks of it, probably a female's gun. I was told that it was a woman had possibly shot her husband, but he wasn't supposed to be there. I thought maybe this guy left for work, came back, and she thought it was a burglar and accidentally shot him. I have to look for a reason as to why this tragic event happened. And if it is an accident, we're going to have to figure out why it happened. We needed to obtain some more statements from her, more in depth of what happened that morning.
Ken Samard was born in Albany, Oregon on January 25, 1958. He was one of 4 siblings raised in a blue-collar family.
Ken was a very hard worker. He always had a job. He grew up farming. When he was probably 16, he worked in the fields doing the combining, windrowing, and plowing. He graduated in '76, and he joined the Navy. He married his girlfriend, Vicky, and he was in the Navy for 4 years and was stationed various places.
He had a pretty funny, dry sense of humor. His personality was one of, I would say, good character. He really cared about people.
Ken was a very kind person. He went out of his way to help anybody. He loved to learn new skills, and just being there for his family and really helping his family, he loved that.
When Ken returned home from deployment, he found work as an engineer. But the time away had caused him and his wife to drift apart.
When he came home, the marriage didn't last very long, so they were divorced. And soon after that, he met Cindy.
My dad met my mom through my uncle and his girlfriend. I have 2 brothers. Brad is the oldest. I'm the middle child, and Matthew is the youngest.
Dad took us camping all the time when we were kids. And we'd go gold panning or go hiking or we'd go fishing or hunting or whatever, and just always kind of had a good time.
Unfortunately, his second marriage only lasted a few years longer than his first.
My mom and dad, they were divorced when I was around 2. My mom and dad both have really different personalities and wanted different things in life, and they kind of grew apart.
Starting over for the second time, Ken was now in his early 30s. He took a job at a paper mill in Millersburg, Oregon, and put his engineering skills to use as a member of the Oregon National Guard.
We were in the maintenance section. He was a mechanic, so was I. We became fast friends. We're traveling to wherever, the vehicles are that we're working on.
Ken spent the following years focused on his work and his children. Then, in 1996, 38-year-old Ken met the woman who would become his third wife, 43-year-old Roberta Bogart.
Roberta was at the mill. She was a secretary there. Then they moved to Alaska.
We were living with my mom and we were in school, so it was just weekends that we would be with him. I was about 14 when Roberta and my dad started dating.
This is my dad. And Roberta.
She was nice, she was friendly, she always had a smile on her face, seemed to make my dad happy.
Before we knew it, they flew to Las Vegas and got married.
Will you have Roberta as your wife, to share your life with her, to speak the truth to her in love, to honor and tenderly care for her?
Yes, I will.
Five years later, the couple bought their dream home in Millersburg.
It's a 5-bedroom house with the huge barn, with the property, out of town.
He really enjoyed that piece of land that he had.
He would spoil her. Ken went and bought her a new car because he was making good money. They always seemed happy and go lucky.
13 years into their marriage, the couple's good fortune ended when the paper mill closed down and they both lost their jobs. But Ken was nothing if not resourceful.
He starts a company, he becomes a roofer, then he falls on hard times again. When he falls off a roof, he injures himself where he shatters both of his heels. Despite that, Ken is a fighter. He says, I'm gonna go back to school, I'm gonna learn a new trade. And so he begins studying to become an HVAC engineer. And so again, he picks himself up and he's studying to better his life.
Ken seemed very excited about HVAC school and getting out there to help people and just making a difference in someone's life.
At this point in Ken's life, his adult children, his 3 adult children, are grown. They're out of the house. He's a grandfather. He's overcome some hard times, but he's with Roberta. They're living in their dream home that they had purchased, and he's got a new career. Things are looking up for him.
Ken's recovery is brought to an abrupt halt after another accident has resulted in his death.
Roberta's in the back of a patrol car. The deputies on scene had already went into the house, secured it. Ken, he appeared dressed for work. I mean, he had a jacket on, his lunchbox, a mug. His keys were back there on the back porch as well.
There's really no sign of any struggle. There are no, there's no broken glass. There are no pieces of furniture tipped over.
The scene appears to match what Roberta told officers, but they won't know for sure until they conduct a thorough investigation.
We did the preliminary exam of the body, and right in the crook of the neck, we found a gunshot wound. We're trying to determine, does this gunshot wound match what Roberta's telling us? The next step, there's going to be a detective assigned to work on an application for a search warrant. So while we're waiting for that, we went back to our sheriff's office and sat in an interview room and interviewed Roberta.
Not under arrest or anything. We're just trying to get kind of the facts, and sometimes it's easier to bring you down here and interview you. So, can you tell me what happened?
I've been really sad. Depressed. They're going to take away our house from us, and I just couldn't face it anymore. I just couldn't face all that.
You're going to take the house here?
Our house is being foreclosed. I was trying to do myself.
The reality is that financial stress it can be massive. It can be overwhelming for a married couple. So people do make rash, drastic decisions.
She said she was going to shoot herself, and Ken showed up. It accidentally went off. He got shot, but in processing all sorts of possibilities, a lot of mistakes happen in the dark. You can stub your toe or end up accidentally killing your husband. So that's what we're looking for now, is that what evidence can we find to support Roberta's statement? Or are we going to find stuff that conflicts with that?
Coming up, Roberta reenacts the fatal shooting.
She says she's bringing the gun up to kill herself. It accidentally goes off and hits Ken.
But was it really an accident?
I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her so bad.
Roberta Samard has just confessed to accidentally killing her 57-year-old husband, Ken, in a botched suicide attempt. Lynn County detectives press her for more details.
Roberta tells us when Ken left for work, she retrieves this firearm from the bedroom.
I was pacing around my house and didn't just do it instantly when I thought I had the chance, because all I could think of was my kids.
And did you think Ken had already left? Is that what you were thinking?
No, he walked out the door. He left the house. He usually doesn't come back.
She she tells detectives that for some reason he came back in to the house and caught her in that very moment.
I guess maybe he must have seen the gun in my hand. He must have, because he said, "What?" And he had this weird look on his face. And I said, "I love you." And then the next thing I knew, it went off.
She said when she's bringing the gun up to kill herself, it accidentally goes off and hits Ken. What would be my response if I saw my spouse doing something like that? You know, I'd probably reach out and try to grab the gun. Well, if there's a struggle, she pulls away, he pulls it close, she loses her balance, now the gun's up, now it accidentally goes off.
He saw it, and he would take it away from me. He's stronger than I am. So he saw it, and so I'm guessing, I don't know what happened.
You're thinking, man, this lady just was in a mental health crisis. Now she's just suffered this tragic loss. It's her husband. So yeah, not being able to remember minor details wasn't unusual.
Roberta's memory might be hazy, but she's clear about one thing.
Roberta maintains, I shot him, but this was not supposed to happen. This was an accident. I loved my husband.
We have a lot of these cases where somebody will kill their spouse and then kill themselves. Have you ever thought about that in the past?
Ever.
How about this woman?
Never. I would never think about her again. Never. Never.
Rather than taking Roberta's word at face value, detectives talk to the Samards' loved ones to gain insight into their marriage.
Ken and Roberta, they live alone. They don't have any roommates. You're interviewing family to see, oh, is it possible Ken's abusive? Is Roberta controlling? Nobody really says that. They describe Ken and Roberta as kind of the perfect couple.
Ken and Roberta did seem very happy when they were together. They'd be joking and enjoying each other's company.
In all the time that I knew him and knew Roberta, he never said a bad word about her, right? He really cared about her.
Ken's family was unaware of any financial troubles at home.
My uncle read in the newspaper that my dad's house was up for foreclosure. So he called my dad and said, "Hey, Kenny, what's going on with the house? Do you need some help?" And my dad said, No, Roberta's got it all under control. She said it was a mix-up and they changed mortgage companies or something, and she sent the check to place A and it should have went to place B, but it's all covered. It's all good to go.
Loved ones also say they're surprised to learn Roberta had been struggling with her mental health.
She was always smiling. She was, always positive, always up and going.
I never knew her to be suicidal or to be depressed.
Despite receiving positive impressions from family and friends, the timing of Roberta's attempted suicide and Ken's sudden return doesn't feel quite right.
Seems a little unlikely that at that very moment Ken might have walked in right as she planned to shoot herself, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
There were a lot of questions asked where she said, I don't know. And we're imagining stuff on just limited information. If we put that with the actual physical actions, we can put it in perspective.
To verify Roberta's version of events, detectives offer an unorthodox solution.
So here's what we would like to do today, is at some point, but maybe would you be willing to do a reenactment for that?
Okay.
You have two people, one person's dead, one story. At this point, she either didn't remember or he didn't grab the gun.
Roberta Samard claims that she has accidentally killed her husband Ken during a thwarted suicide attempt. Detectives prepare to return to the scene to allow Roberta to reenact the morning's events.
One of the things that helps us understand the chain of events that occurred is a reenactment. So once Ken's body was gone, we proposed that to Roberta to do the reenactment back at the house. She agreed. So we drove her back, and the house was still being processed for evidence and the like, but we did a video recorded reenactment. My partner played the role of Ken. So let's go ahead and shut the door. And he's standing out there like that. Okay, so you open the door.
Like this. He must have been like right there. And when I opened up the door, I was standing like this, and he took a step back and he was standing there.
Okay. So you got the gun in your hand, right? Can you make a finger gun for me? Yeah. So you have a finger gun, and he's right there. And as you open the door, he's going to take a step back when you open the door, right? So when she opens the door, take a step back and then show me what you do. It gave us kind of a perspective of how close they were to each other, which, probably 2 feet apart at most. So close enough to where, Ken could have reached out and grabbed it.
Roberta's reenactment suggests the barrel of the gun was about 18 inches from Ken when it was fired.
You think that's when it went off?
I there's not. I don't think he grabbed me. He had to have. I don't know.
The story Roberta's telling detectives makes sense when you look at the trajectory of the bullet. The way it entered through Ken's neck, he's almost a foot taller than her, and so she says the gun went off as I'm bringing it up to my head. That lines up.
How she portrayed it, it was possible. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her so bad. But one of the things that stuck out in my mind was, here we are, standing at a glass door, looking out on a patio where just hours earlier, her husband died. There was no emotion, no tears, nothing.
After Roberta's confusing reenactment, investigators acquire a search warrant for the Samard home.
They need to search every inch of this house to figure out what happened here. There has to be more information. So they begin searching the house.
We're looking for any type of evidence that's either going to prove or disprove Roberta's story. It was a clean house. This is a well-kept, older person's home. Just looked organized.
In the course of their search, detectives find something out of place.
In the bottom of a laundry hamper was a foreclosure notice relating to the sale of Ken and Roberta's home for non-payment on the mortgage. It was rather weird where we found it because I know I don't, and I'm sure a lot of people don't file important paperwork in the bottom of a laundry hamper.
In an otherwise tidy home, it looks to investigators as though Roberta could have been trying to hide the paperwork from her husband.
Roberta's signature was the only signature on those foreclosure documents. Ken's signature was not on them.
In Ken's office, they find something equally intriguing.
They find a notebook that Ken had filled out. It was a really self-reflective type of notebook. And it gives you a peek behind the curtain of their marriage between him and Roberta.
Coming up, Ken tells his story from beyond the grave.
It's really the only thing we have that gave us his thoughts and his feelings. As I'm reading Ken's notes, I'm thinking, you poor bastard.
Just hours after the shooting, investigators are conducting a thorough examination of the Samard home. Having just found a foreclosure document revealing the Samards' dire financial situation, another piece of evidence emerges in Ken's office.
When we were looking, we go room by room, and as we're looking through this office, we come across this notebook.
It was found with his homework for the HVAC classes. Seemed like he would just been free writing, to get his emotions out.
In his notebook, Ken complains about the frequent conflicts in his marriage.
I had some notes in there about Roberta being controlling about money. Him always having to ask permission for money or permission to spend money. In and of themselves, they weren't really anything, but it started to provide an insight into maybe this marriage or the things that Roberta had told us. Maybe the relationship wasn't all peaches and cream. It spells it out pretty clearly that Ken does not have an accounting of where his money's going or their money's going.
It does mention that she's allowed to spend money, but when he spends the money, it causes an argument.
You really get this idea that he's helpless and that Roberta is the one who holds all the power in their marriage.
Toward the end of the notebook, Ken even writes about leaving Roberta.
The last thing he writes is, maybe I'll be on my own.
I think he was just probably about ready to sever that relationship.
To investigators, the notebook puts Ken's shooting in a new perspective.
It's really the only thing we have that gave us Ken's thoughts and his feelings. So that's the closest we could get to how he was feeling or what his perspective of the relationship was.
I never, ever suspected that there was any problem in their marriage or that my dad had ever even had those thoughts. From the outside, looking in, we thought Dad was happy. He was living his life. He was, having fun, doing what he wanted to do. And that wasn't the case.
Knowing the house was in foreclosure, detectives dig into where the money was going.
Roberta liked having the fancy things and basically being viewed in a certain light.
She liked to spoil her friends. She liked to buy them, extravagant gifts.
I just can't imagine if you don't have the money to pay for your house, why you'd be buying extravagant gifts from your friends other than give this impression that you're well off and living this fabulous life.
What they learned from this notebook is really important because detectives are looking at this wondering, could this be a motive as to why she shot him?
The notebook combined with the foreclosure paperwork start to paint a clear picture.
Whether Ken gave Roberta the impression that he was on the verge of leaving, Probably in her mind, she knew that once he found out about the house, he was going to be done.
Investigators review Roberta's 911 call for further proof.
Roberta, I'm sorry. I need you to take a deep breath and try and calm down. Can you check and tell me if he's okay? Can you tell me where he was shot? Okay, can you check on him? I want to send medics to help him. I need... You don't want to go see if he's okay?
There's a lot of things during this investigation that just didn't make sense. She can't tell the dispatcher where she shot Ken. She doesn't want to check on Ken. During the interview, she acts like she's crying, but there's no tears. You put everything together and there's this just a whole facade of a web of lies.
After a swift investigation, detectives sit back down with Roberta Samard, just 12 hours after Ken's death.
We hadn't had a chance to get the autopsy done yet, so we were operating on information that we had. Came back to the sheriff's office and had some follow-up questions.
Here's kind of where we're at. Obviously something bad happened today. The death was caused. In looking at your story and everything you've told us, it rises to the level of a manslaughter. So you will be arrested today. And I think you probably had that thought in your mind at some point.
No, I never dreamed that was going to be what was going to happen.
I think Roberta was in disbelief that she was actually getting arrested. In her mind, she thought she was going to be able to just walk out the front doors a free woman.
As Roberta spends her first night in jail, local TV picks up the story. And investigators receive a call from a local real estate investor that helps put the pieces together.
I was a house flipper, so I flipped homes, bought them at foreclosure auctions. And then I was watching the 11 o'clock news and was totally shocked. My mind is like, oh my gosh, that's my house. The next morning I called the sheriff's office, basically like, hey, I own the house now. Do you need to talk to me?
We learned Roberta had worked with the new owner to stay in the house for a few more weeks, which that time came and went. So she got another extension. We're surmising that Ken never had an idea.
The fact that the house was sold from under Ken's feet further cements detectives' suspicions.
They asked if I had spoken with the husband. Nope, never seen him, never spoke with him, only dealt with Roberta. And, in my conversations with her, she's like, oh, I handle the finances. I just don't want to upset my husband. Rather not evict her, so give her an extra week or so. And then next thing I know, the night before, we were supposed to get possession of the property, and her mugshot came across the screen. I was so shocked. She was just like a little older lady. Looked harmless.
Brian's statement appears to confirm Ken didn't know he lost his dream home.
The day Ken died was the day that they were supposed to be packed up and moved out of that house. There were no moving boxes. If I lost my house and I had to be out that day and my house wasn't packed yet, I probably wouldn't be going to work. I'd probably be packing.
A month before all of this happened, my dad had started buying materials, and they were still sitting out back to build onto the porch. So why would he be doing upgrades to a house that is going up for foreclosure? My dad absolutely loved that house. he would have never lost that house, especially not for the minimal amount of money that was still owed on it.
It seems Roberta had spent months hiding the truth from Ken, but time had finally run out, and detectives suspect she acted out of desperation.
When you look at everything as a whole and you see the walls were closing in around her, I mean, they were losing their house that day. But all of that could also lend itself to Roberta's story of that she was extremely depressed and had nowhere to turn, and she was going to take her life. And so what detectives need is physical evidence that points to Roberta murdering her husband.
On November 17th, the day after Ken's shooting, the medical examiner performs an autopsy. Investigators hope it will provide the proof they're looking for.
The biggest finding in the autopsy was the wound Ken suffered was the close contact wound, which tells us that muzzle's going to be right up there, close and center. There's going to be charring sitting around the wound, and probably not going to happen from, 18 or so inches away as she described it.
Roberta had told police she couldn't remember if Ken had tried to grab the gun to stop her from shooting that firearm. And what the autopsy revealed is there was no gunshot residue on Ken's hands, indicating that in all likelihood he did not try to grab the gun from her or interfere.
The evidence suggests her arm was outreached and she pulled that trigger intentionally to kill Ken Samard. The autopsy blows this case open. We sent the firearm to the Oregon State Police. We wanted to know what the trigger pull on that firearm was, because if it's one of those triggers that you barely touch it and it goes off, it gives credence to Roberta's story. In this case, it was a pretty hard trigger pull. I had interviewed some people that had taken her to the firing range, and she had struggled shooting a gun.
She had to squeeze that trigger pretty tight for it to go off, which tells them, you did this on purpose. This was intentional.
Following Ken's autopsy, the charges against Roberta are increased from first-degree manslaughter to murder.
The trial was set for April 6, 2017 in Lynn County Courthouse here in Albany.
The outcome of Roberta Samard's murder trial hinges on the interpretation of the medical examiner's findings.
The prosecution's trying to prove it was a close contact wound. The defense is trying to prove it wasn't.
The trial was long, hard. Images I will never forget. But my dad's always been big on justice. Like, you can't be a criminal in this world and not expect to pay the consequence for it.
After 8 days of arguments, the case is handed over to the jury. They take 5 hours to deliberate.
The jury comes back and sides with the prosecution, determining that Roberta is guilty of murdering her husband, Ken. Roberta is ultimately sentenced to 25 years in prison.
I think 25 years is kind of a petty sentence. However, going in at 63, the odds are against her. I honestly don't think that she'll make it out of there. That being said, as harsh as that may sound, I'm okay with that.
Despite her conviction, Roberta continues to insist she's innocent, and many questions still remain.
In this investigation, the hardest thing for people to get their minds around is the whole circumstances why Roberta resorted to killing Ken. What was the point of that? I still think it was going to be a murder-suicide. She was going to kill him and then herself. Maybe it was she wanted to save Ken from embarrassment of losing his house, but she chickened out.
I don't think at all that she was going to commit suicide. She's not that kind of person. I think that she just planned it wrong.
She had built, a house of cards on lies and deception, and the pressure, caused her to snap.
I think it all could have been avoided if she would have been honest with Ken. I bet you he would have worked through it with her.
When I think about her and how he died and what she did, I'm still very much so angry with her and don't ever want to see her face, really.
Roberta choosing to kill Ken didn't solve anything. It didn't solve any of her problems. She destroyed her own life. She took away a man who meant a lot to a lot of people.
Ken was someone I looked up to. He always listened. You could tell him anything. So I try to be there for my child, and my family in the way that he was for me.
I just wish he was still here and could play with his grandkids and watch them grow up.
I want people to know that my dad was a good guy. There was no physical, mental, emotional abuse. There was none of that going on. He loved her. He took care of her. I feel like she owes us a reason why. We want the truth. Will we ever get that? Probably not.
It began with a sound that didn't belong. Not a scream. Not glass breaking. Not the kind of noise that pulls curtains open or sends neighbors reaching for the phone. Just a dull, hollow impact, low, heavy, final. The kind of sound that seems to sink into the ground instead of echoing through the air. It happened at exactly 2:17 a.m. behind a row of aging terraced houses in South London, where silence at that hour is absolute, almost suffocating. No one called it in. No one stepped outside. The night swallowed it whole. By sunrise, the street looked exactly the same. Cars lined the curb, curtains drawn tight. A delivery van idled at the corner. A cyclist passed without slowing. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. The kind of morning that carries no warning, no signal that something irreversible has already taken place just hours before. At 9:42 a.m., Emily Carter vanished. She didn't leave a note. She didn't take her phone. She didn't pack a bag or cancel her plans. She simply stopped existing in the places she was supposed to be. A primary school teacher with a strict routine, she was expected in her classroom at 9 o'clock sharp. By 9:15, the school secretary made a call. No answer. By 9:30, concern replaced inconvenience. By 10 o'clock, the concern hardened into something heavier. A colleague drove to her house. The front door was locked. The windows closed. Everything inside appeared untouched. Too untouched. A mug of tea sat on the kitchen counter, still half full, the surface now cold and still, a faint film forming at the top. Her phone rested beside it, plugged in, battery full. Her handbag hung neatly on a chair. Shoes by the door. Coat on the hook. Nothing disturbed. Nothing broken. No sign of panic. No sign of departure. Just absence. Precise. Controlled. Unnatural. The police were called just before noon. At first, it didn't register as a crime. London sees disappearances every day. People leave, people wander, people return. The system has categories for that. Missing. Voluntary. Temporary. But something about this didn't fit. The responding officers stepped into the house and felt it immediately. Not evidence. Not yet. Just a feeling. The kind that settles in your chest before your mind catches up. A stillness that feels staged. A quiet that feels deliberate. They began the standard sweep. Living room clear. Bedroom untouched.
Bathroom, no anomalies.
Kitchen normal, except for the tea. Then the back door. Locked from the inside. But near the lower frame, just above the threshold, something caught the light. A faint smear. Not obvious. Not dramatic. But wrong. The color was off. Dark, but diluted, as if something had been wiped away with effort, but without precision. Forensics would later test it. At that moment, it was simply noted.
Logged.
Bagged. And then the garden. A narrow rectangle of soil, boxed in by wooden fencing on all sides, typical of the area. Nothing remarkable at first glance, but one officer paused, looked closer. Something about the ground didn't sit right. The texture was uneven. The color slightly darker in one patch. As if the earth had been disturbed recently, then pressed back into place. They marked the spot. Brought tools. Started digging. 20 centimeters down, nothing. 30, still nothing. No body. No object.
No immediate explanation.
But the disturbance mattered. It told a story without words. Someone had been there, recently, in the dark, working, moving soil with purpose. Not digging randomly, not testing, doing something specific then covering it up. And that sound, 2:17 a.m., suddenly felt less like coincidence. More like confirmation. Neighbors were questioned immediately. Doors knocked. Voices low but urgent. Most had nothing to offer. They slept. They heard nothing. They saw nothing. Except one. A man to cross the street, mid-50s, retired, chronic insomniac. He said he'd been awake that night, watching television with the volume low. He didn't hear a scream, didn't hear an argument, but he did hear something else. Footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Dragging slightly, like weight being carried or pulled. He didn't look outside. That detail would haunt him later. Police canvassed the surrounding streets for CCTV, shops, traffic lights, bus routes, anything that might have captured movement between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. The footage came in fragments. Grainy, inconsistent, limited. At 2:11 a.m., a figure appears at the edge of a camera frame 2 streets away.
Tall.
Hooded. Moving with purpose. Head down. Hands hidden. At 2:19 a.m., another camera, closer this time, catches the same figure turning onto Emily Street. Then nothing. The camera closest to her house was offline that night. At 2:26 a.m., a different angle further down the block shows the figure again. Leaving. Still alone. But different. The posture had changed. The movement was slower, heavier, controlled. And there was something in his hands. Something long,
dark,
indistinct. The resolution wasn't enough to identify it. But it was enough to raise a question. What had he taken? Or what had he done? The footage was analyzed frame by frame, enhanced, stabilized, cross-referenced. But 2003 London wasn't built for surveillance clarity. Cameras blinked out. Angles overlapped imperfectly. Blind spots swallowed crucial seconds. The trail dissolved. The figure vanished into the city. Emily Carter became a case file. Then a priority case. Then a problem. Search teams moved quickly. Parks were combed. Drains inspected. Abandoned buildings entered. Dogs tracked scent from her home to the street, then lost it completely at the curb. No vehicle was clearly identified. No witness came forward with a license plate. No ransom call. No message. No trace of digital activity. Her family went public within days. Photographs circulated. Interviews aired. Her name spread across headlines. Missing teacher disappears without a trace. Community shocked. Police baffled. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The smear near the door was tested. Inconclusive. Too degraded. The soil disturbance re-examined. Nothing found. The CCTV figure never identified.
No fingerprints.
No DNA.
No weapon.
Just questions. And silence. By the end of the first year, the case began to cool. Detectives were reassigned. Resources shifted. New cases took priority. The file remained open, but momentum was gone. Emily Carter became a phrase. A reference. A cold case. Years passed. The house was sold. New tenants moved in. The garden was leveled. The soil turned over. Time did what it always does. It buried not just evidence, but urgency. London changed. Cameras improved. Streets evolved. But the answers didn't come. Until 2019. 16 years later. A construction crew working 2 streets away began excavation for a new residential development. Standard procedure. Measured depth. Layer by layer. At 11:08 a.m., a shovel struck something solid. Not stone. Not pipe. Something lighter. They cleared around it. And then they saw it.
Bone.
Work stopped immediately. The site was secured. Police arrived within minutes. What started as routine construction turned into a controlled forensic recovery operation. The soil was carefully removed.
Piece by piece.
What emerged over the next 6 hours was not random. It was deliberate. A human skeleton. Incomplete. Disarticulated. Arranged. Not scattered as if discarded. Placed with intention. The remains were wrapped in fragments of fabric, long decomposed but still traceable. The positioning suggested control. Planning. Time taken to ensure concealment. This wasn't panic. This was method. Forensic teams worked through the night. Every fragment documented. Every layer analyzed. Soil samples taken. Fiber traces collected. By early morning, dental records confirmed the identity. Emily Carter. The missing teacher. The case that never resolved. Back from the ground. But the discovery didn't just reopen the case. It changed it. Because buried beneath the remains, sealed by years of compressed earth, was something no one expected to survive. A plastic bag. Not standard issue. Not police. Carefully folded. Preserved. Inside it, one object.
A key. Old. Brass.
Slightly corroded but intact. Stamped with a number. A number that didn't match anything in Emily's life. Not her home. Not her workplace. Not any known property connected to her. But it matched something else. A location. A place that had been searched in 2003. A place that had been cleared. A place connected to a man who had spoken to police, answered their questions, and walked away without suspicion. A man whose name sat quietly in the original file. Barely noticed. Barely relevant. Until now. 16 years of silence collapsed into a single moment. Because the key meant one thing. Someone had left it there. With her. On purpose. And suddenly, the cold case wasn't cold anymore. It was awake. The key didn't just reopen the case, it rewrote it. 16 years of silence collapsed under a single piece of metal, small enough to fit in a pocket, heavy enough to drag an entire investigation back from the dead. Detectives who had long since moved on were called back in. Old files were pulled from storage. Boxes of reports, photographs, transcripts, dust shaken loose, pages turned for the first time in over a decade. And right there, buried in the early interviews, was the name. Daniel Reeves. At the time, he had been nothing more than a footnote. A man who lived less than a mile from Emily Carter. A man who had been interviewed once, briefly, and dismissed just as quickly. No criminal record. No known connection to the victim. No inconsistencies in his statement, at least none that had seemed worth chasing. In 2003, he had told police he was home that night. Alone. Asleep. There was nothing to contradict him. Until now. The key found with Emily's remains bore a stamped code, B17. It matched a storage unit in a small industrial complex on the outskirts of South London, a facility that had been operational at the time of her disappearance. Records showed that the unit had been rented in early 2003 under a name that no longer existed in any active database. But cross-referencing old payment logs revealed something else. The payments had been made in cash. Except once. A single transaction, March 2003, processed through a debit card. That card belonged to Daniel Reeves. The air in the investigation room shifted. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was a crack. Detectives moved fast. The storage facility had changed ownership twice since 2003. Records were incomplete, partially digitized, partially lost. But the physical structure remained. Unit B17 still existed. It had been rented and vacated multiple times over the years. No one remembered anything unusual. But the lock. The lock was older. Replaced recently, but the original mechanism, archived, tagged, stored in maintenance records, was traced back.
And the key.
The key matched.
Exactly.
Which meant one thing. The object buried with Emily had once opened that door. A forensic team was dispatched immediately. The current tenant of B17 was contacted, removed, and the unit was sealed under warrant. What they found inside wasn't dramatic.
No hidden compartments.
No obvious signs of violence. Just a standard storage space. Concrete floor, metal walls, faint smell of dust and oil. But forensics doesn't look for what's obvious. They look for what remains. Luminol was deployed. The lights went out. And then the floor began to glow. Not everywhere. Just in patches.
Faint.
Broken. Inconsistent. But undeniable.
Blood. Old. Cleaned.
But present. 16 years hadn't erased it completely. The pattern suggested movement. Dragging. Repeated contact with the same surface. Something, or someone, had been on that floor long enough to leave a trace that survived time, cleaning agents, and multiple tenants. Samples were collected. Sent for analysis. Back at headquarters, detectives reconstructed the timeline. March 2003. Emily disappears. March 2003. A payment is made on B17 using Reeves' debit card. Coincidence doesn't stretch that far. Daniel Reeves was located within 24 hours. He hadn't left London. Hadn't changed his name. Hadn't vanished. He had simply continued. Older now.
Thinner.
Working a quiet job in logistics. Living alone in a modest flat. No visible signs of a life interrupted by violence or crime. When officers knocked on his door, he answered.
Come.
Almost expectant. He agreed to come in for questioning without resistance. Inside the interview room, the air was tight. The kind of pressure that builds when something long buried begins to surface. Reeves sat still. Hands folded. Eyes steady. The first questions were routine. Where were you in March 2003? Home. Alone. Asleep. The same answer. Unchanged. Then the key was placed on the table. For the first time, his expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. A flicker. A hesitation. Gone almost instantly.
But not missed.
Detectives leaned in. Do you recognize this?
No.
It was too quick. Too clean. And now they knew to push. They presented the storage unit. B-17. The payment.
His card.
A single moment in time where his life intersected with a place that now glowed under forensic light. Reeves didn't panic. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't ask for a lawyer. He adjusted his posture slightly. Looked at the table. Then back up. I used storage units back then, he said. For work.
For personal things.
I don't remember specific numbers. It was plausible. Too plausible. But the problem with time is that it erodes memory unevenly. Some things fade. Others stay sharp. Detectives shifted approach. Why was your payment used that month? A pause. Longer this time. I might have helped someone, he said. Paid for them. I don't remember.
Someone?
Who? Another pause. I don't know. The cracks were forming. Not enough to break him, but enough to widen. Forensics came back within 48 hours. The blood in Unit B-17 matched Emily Carter. Not partial. Not inconclusive. A full match. The room changed again. This wasn't a cold case anymore. This was active. And the man sitting across from them was no longer a witness.
He was a suspect.
Reeves was brought back in. This time, the tone was different.
Direct.
Unforgiving. We found her blood in your storage unit. Silence. The kind that stretches. Presses. Forces something to surface. He exhaled slowly. Looked down. Then spoke. I didn't kill her. It was the first deviation. The first step away from the original story. And once that line is crossed, it's hard to go back. Detectives stayed quiet. Let him continue.
He didn't.
The silence returned. He folded back into himself. The door was closing again. So they opened another one. The CCTV footage. Grainy.
Blurred.
But real. They played it on the screen. The hooded figure. 2:11 a.m. 2:19 a.m. 2:26 a.m. Reeves watched. No reaction at first. Then a shift. Subtle. Almost invisible.
But there.
You recognize this? A detective asked.
No.
But the answer lacked the certainty from before. It wavered. Just enough. Then they showed him the still frame. Enhanced. Contrasted. A detail pulled from the blur.
A watch.
On the figure's wrist. Distinctive. Unusual. And in 2003, during his original interview, Reeves had been wearing one just like it. A limited model. Not common. Not easily dismissed. He leaned back. Closed his eyes for a moment. And when he opened them, something had changed. Not confession. Not yet. But resistance was weakening. Because the past was no longer buried. It was here. In the room. On the table. In his hands. And the deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Controlled. And for 16 years it had worked. Until someone found the bone. Until someone uncovered the key.
Until the case came back to life.
And now, for the first time since 2003, the question wasn't where Emily Carter had gone. The question was, why her? And what had Daniel Reeves been hiding all this time? The room felt smaller now. Not physically. Nothing had changed. The same table, the same chairs, the same muted hum of fluorescent lights overhead. But something invisible had tightened, drawn inward, compressing the space between the detectives and Daniel Reeves until every breath seemed louder, heavier, more deliberate. He had said it once. I didn't kill her. And then he stopped. For a long time, no one spoke. Silence is not empty in an interrogation room. It fills the air, thickens it, forces movement from the person who wants it gone the most. Reeves shifted in his seat. Not much, just enough. His hands, still folded before, now loosened. Fingers uncurling, then tightening again, as if testing control. His eyes avoided the screen now. No more looking at the footage. No more acknowledging the figure that moved like him, stood like him, carried weight the way he would. The detectives didn't rush. They had learned something crucial. He was no longer denying everything.
He was choosing what to deny.
And that meant the truth was closer than it had ever been. Then tell us what happened, one of them said quietly.
No accusation.
No pressure. Just an opening. Reeves inhaled slowly.
Held it.
Exhaled.
She came to me, he said.
The words dropped into the room like a stone. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy. Came to you, the detective repeated. A nod.
Why?
Another pause. She needed help. The story was forming now, piece by piece, each word placed carefully, like someone navigating a path through broken glass. What kind of help? Reeves swallowed. She said someone was following her, watching her. She was scared. The detectives exchanged a glance, brief, silent, but meaningful. Because that had never been in the file. Emily Carter had never reported being followed, never mentioned fear.
No diary entries.
No messages. No conversations with friends or family that suggested paranoia or threat. Did she say who? The detective asked.
No.
Did you believe her? Reeves hesitated. I didn't know. That answer sat wrong. Too vague, too distant. But they let him continue. She came late, he said, that night. Knocked on my door. She was agitated. Not like herself. What time? I don't remember exactly. But the cameras did. 2:11 a.m. You let her in? A nod. And then? Another breath. Longer this time. We talked. She said she didn't feel safe at home. Said someone had been near her house. Watching. The detectives leaned forward slightly. Because now the story was bending. Not breaking. But bending toward something else. You offered her your storage unit, one of them said. Reeves' eyes flickered. There it was. The connection. I suggested she stay somewhere else for a while, he said. Somewhere no one would think to look. A storage unit.
Cold.
Empty.
Hidden.
Not a place you take someone for safety. Unless safety isn't the goal. Why there? The detective asked. No answer. Why not a hotel? A friend? The police? Silence again. Reeves looked down at his hands. They wouldn't understand, he muttered. That line hung in the air. Ambiguous. Deflective. But revealing. Because it suggested something else, something beyond fear, beyond protection. Control. You took her to be 17, the detective said. Reeves didn't deny it. Another shift. Another line crossed. What happened inside that unit? The question landed hard.
Direct.
Unavoidable. Reeves' jaw tightened. His breathing changed, faster now, less controlled. She panicked, he said.
How?
She wanted to leave, said it was a mistake, that she shouldn't have come. Of course she did. Because nothing about that situation made sense. A frightened woman doesn't choose a locked metal box in an industrial complex as a refuge. She realizes. Too late. You tried to stop her, the detective said. It wasn't a question. Reeves didn't respond. But he didn't deny it either. She tried to leave, the detective continued. And you didn't let her. Reeves closed his eyes. For a moment, it looked like he might speak.
Confess. Collapse.
But instead, he shook his head.
No.
Too fast.
Too sharp.
The wall was still there.
Cracked.
But standing. So they changed direction. Why was her blood on the floor? Another detective asked. Reeves' eyes opened. Sharp now. Alert. Because that question couldn't be dodged with vague answers. I don't know, he said.
A lie.
And everyone in the room knew it. You cleaned it, the detective said. Not well enough.
No.
You spent time there. Enough to leave patterns. Enough to move something heavy.
No.
You carried her out at 2:26 a.m. Silence. Then. I didn't kill her. Again. The same line. Repeated. Refined. But weaker now. Because every time he said it, it had to hold more weight. And it was starting to crack. The detectives let the silence stretch again. Longer this time. Minutes passed. No one moved. Until one of them reached into the file and pulled out a photograph. Placed it on the table. Not of the body. Not yet. But of the key. Found beneath her remains. Buried with her. Why was this with her? The detective asked. Reeves stared at it. For a long time. Long enough that the room seemed to hold its breath. Then his shoulders dropped. Just slightly. Almost imperceptible. But enough. I didn't put it there, he said. Another lie. Or maybe. Another layer. Then who did? The detective pressed. No answer. Someone else had access to that unit? Silence. Someone else was there that night? A flicker.
There.
Gone almost instantly.
But not missed.
The detectives leaned in. Daniel, one of them said quietly, you're not protecting yourself anymore. A beat. You're protecting someone else. The words landed differently. Not as an accusation. As an invitation. A way out. Reeves' breathing slowed. His eyes drifted again. Not to the detectives. Not to the door. But somewhere else. Somewhere far back. 16 years back. There was someone, he said. The first real shift. The first true crack.
Who?
A long pause. Too long. But finally. A woman. The room changed again. Because this wasn't in any file. Not in 2003. Not in any follow-up. No second suspect.
No accomplice.
Nothing. Until now. What woman? The detective asked. Reeves hesitated. Struggling. Balancing something inside his head. What to say, what to hold back, what would break everything if he let it out. She knew Emily, he said. That detail hit hard. Because it rewrote the entire narrative. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. This was connection. Name, the detective said. Reeves shook his head. I can't. Why? She.
He stopped.
Closed his eyes again. The room waited. Because whatever came next would change everything. She told me not to say anything, he whispered. And just like that, the case fractured open in a completely new direction. Because if there was another person, someone who knew Emily, someone who had influence over Reeves, someone who had been there that night, then this wasn't just a hidden crime. It was a shared one. And for 16 years, they had both stayed silent. Until now. The air shifted the moment he said it. A woman. Not an accomplice pulled from speculation. Not a vague shadow inserted to deflect blame. A presence.
Real.
Close enough to Emily to matter. Close enough to Daniel Reeves to silence him for 16 years. The room went still again, but not the same stillness as before. This one carried direction.
Wait.
Momentum. The investigation had been a straight line, then a dead end. Now it split open into something wider, darker, more complicated. Who is she? The detective asked. Reeves didn't answer. He stared at the table, at the key, at the thin line of scratches across its surface, marks no one had noticed until now, marks that suggested it had been handled repeatedly, turned again and again in a lock that held something hidden. She knew Emily, the detective pressed.
How?
Silence. You said she told you not to talk. That means she was there, that night, in that unit. Reeves' jaw tightened. Still nothing. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was resistance. It was calculation. And beneath it, something else, fear. Not of the police. Of her. Daniel, the other detective said quietly, leaning forward just enough to close the space between them, you're not protecting yourself. You're protecting her. And she's not here. You are. A beat. Another. Reeves' eyes lifted, slow, reluctant. There are things you don't understand, he said. Then make us understand. He shook his head. Not a denial, a refusal, a boundary drawn too late. They changed tactics. Because names can be pulled from silence when memory is forced to move. Emily Carter, one detective said, voice steady, controlled. 26. Primary school teacher. Routine life. No known threats. No history of fear. And yet you're telling us she came to you, terrified, saying someone was watching her. Reeves didn't respond. So we looked again, the detective continued. We went back through her life. Not the surface.
Deeper.
Work records. Staff lists. Parent interactions. Colleagues. Friends. Anyone who might have been close enough to matter. A folder slid across the table. Photos. Names. Connections. Reeves didn't touch it. But his eyes moved. Scanning. And then a pause. Barely there. But enough. The detective saw it. Reached forward. Flipped the page. A photograph now on top. A woman in her early 30s. Dark hair. Sharp features. Composed expression that didn't quite reach the eyes. Her, the detective asked. Reeves looked away. Too fast. And that was answer enough. Say her name. Silence. Say it. A long breath. Then. Clara. The name hung in the air like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Clara.
No ser nam.
But they didn't need it yet. Because they already had it. Clara Whitmore. Emily's colleague. Same school. Same staff meetings. Same corridors. Two lives intersecting daily, quietly, invisibly. Until something broke. You worked with her? The detective asked. Reeves nodded once. Not directly, he said. I knew her through someone else. Through Emily? A hesitation. Then. Yes. The threads tightened. A triangle now, not a line.
Emily.
Clara. Reeves. Connected. But how deeply? How long had you known Clara? The detective asked. A few months. Before March 2003? Yes. And Emily? I didn't know her well. Another lie. Or, at least, another distortion. Because nothing about this was distant anymore. You were at her house, the detective said, that night. Reeves didn't deny it. You took her to the unit. Silence. You said she came to you, that she was afraid. But what if that's not what happened? Reeves' eyes snapped up.
A reaction. Sharp.
Immediate. What if she didn't come to you at all? The detective continued. What if Clara brought her? The room tightened again. Because now the narrative wasn't just bending. It was breaking. That's not, Reeves started. But he stopped himself. Too late. Finish that, the detective said. Reeves shook his head. But the crack had widened. She didn't come alone, did she? The detective pressed. No answer. She trusted Clara. A flicker.
There.
She followed her. Reeves' breathing changed again. Faster now. Unstable. Into your world, the detective said. Not the other way around. No, Reeves said, louder this time. The first real pushback. But it sounded thin. Uncertain. Then tell us what really happened, the detective said. Silence. Again. But different now. Because it wasn't empty. It was full of something pressing against the inside, trying to get out. She said it would be quick, Reeves muttered. The words came out low. Almost lost.
But not missed.
Who said that? The detective asked. Reeves didn't respond. Clara? A pause. Then. Yes. The room shifted again. Because now there was intention. Planning. She told you what would be quick, the detective asked. Reeves swallowed. She said Emily just needed to be calmed down, that she was unstable, that she might hurt herself. A convenient story. A controlled narrative. A way to justify something that didn't make sense. You believed her? He hesitated. I didn't know what to think. But he went along with it. That much was clear. You let them both into the unit, the detective said. Reeves nodded slowly. And then? A long pause. Longer than any before. Because this was the edge. The moment where the past stops being something remembered and becomes something relived. They argued, he said.
Who?
Clara and Emily. About what? I don't know. It escalated fast. Emily wanted to leave. Clara wouldn't let her. The pattern was forming. Not random. Not chaotic. Controlled.
Directed.
Did Clara hurt her? The detective asked. Reeves' hands tightened again. Knuckles whitening. I didn't see, he started. Then stopped. Because that wasn't true.
He had seen something.
Enough to carry it for 16 years. What did you see? The detective pressed. Reeves closed his eyes. And this time. He didn't open them right away. I heard it first, he said. The word slow now.
Heavy.
A sound. A dull, hollow impact. The same sound. 2:17 a.m. The beginning. The thing no one could explain. She fell, Reeves said. But the word felt wrong. Too soft. Too simple. Or she was pushed, the detective said quietly. Reeves didn't answer. Because the truth was already in the room. She hit the floor, he whispered. And then? Nothing. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't resistance. It was collapse. Because, whatever came next,
he had lived with it.
For 16 years. And now, it was coming back.
Piece by piece.
And it wasn't done yet. The silence didn't break all at once. It fractured. Hairline cracks running through 16 years of control, of denial, of carefully constructed distance. Daniel Reeves sat motionless, eyes still closed, as if the room had dissolved and he was no longer in a chair under fluorescent light, but somewhere else. Cold concrete, metal walls, the echo of something heavy meeting the ground. She hit the floor, he had said. But the word hit was too clean, too accidental. It didn't carry the weight of intention or the force of what had actually happened inside that storage unit at 2:17 a.m. The detectives didn't interrupt. They didn't need to. Because now the memory was moving on its own. Reeves inhaled, slow and uneven, then opened his eyes again. They were different now. Not defensive. Not calculating. Haunted. There was shouting, he said, voice lower than before. It escalated fast. I didn't expect that. Clara, she was calm when we arrived. Controlled. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. But Emily, she realized something wasn't right the moment the door closed. Of course she did. Metal walls.
No windows.
No exit that didn't lead through the people she had trusted. She tried to leave immediately, Reeves continued. She moved for the door. Clara blocked her.
Told her to stop.
Told her she was overreacting. The classic pivot. Reassure. Minimize. Control. But Emily didn't stop, he said. She pushed past her. Reached for the handle. Reeves' hands moved slightly on the table, fingers mimicking the motion without him realizing. And then Clara grabbed her. The words landed heavier now.
No ambiguity.
No distance. Where? A detective asked quietly. Reeves swallowed. Her arm, then her shoulder. She pulled her back hard. Emily lost balance, stumbled, but she didn't fall yet. She turned. She was angry now. Scared but angry. She shouted. Asked what this was. Asked why we brought her there.
We.
The inclusion mattered. You said you didn't know Emily well, the detective said. Reeves didn't respond. Because that statement no longer held. You were there, the detective continued. You watched. Reeves' jaw tightened. I didn't think it would go that far, he said. A familiar line. A distancing line. But the room wasn't accepting distance anymore. What happened next? The detective asked. Reeves hesitated. Then spoke. Clara pushed her again. This time, harder. She lost her footing. There was nothing to grab. Just the wall. Concrete. Cold. She slipped, her heel caught, and then
he stopped.
Because this was the moment. The point where everything changes. She fell, he finished. But again, the word felt insufficient. Describe it, the detective said. Reeves closed his eyes again. Not to avoid.
To see.
She hit the floor head first, he said slowly. There was a sound not loud, but wrong. Like something inside the impact didn't belong there. The same sound. The one no one understood.
The one swallowed by the night.
Did she move? The detective asked. A pause. Yes, Reeves said. At first. At first. She was breathing. Shallow. Irregular. Her eyes were open but unfocused.
She tried to speak.
Couldn't form words. Just sounds. Reeves' voice tightened. Clara knelt beside her, he continued. Not panicking. Not scared. Just watching. Assessing. That detail settled heavily in the room. Because it wasn't reaction. It was calculation. What did she say? The detective asked. Reeves shook his head. Nothing. Not right away. She just looked at her. Then she looked at me. A beat. And she said, "It's fine." The words echoed. Cold. Detached. It's fine. As if a human life collapsing on a concrete floor could be categorized, managed, dismissed. You believed her? The detective asked. Reeves didn't answer immediately. I wanted to, he said finally. The truth, stripped down. Not belief.
Desire.
She told me Emily would recover, he continued. Said she just needed time. That moving her would make it worse. That we should wait. But they didn't call for help. They didn't open the door. They didn't let her leave. They stayed. And that changed everything. How long? The detective asked. Reeves' eyes drifted again.
Minutes.
Maybe more. It felt stretched, like time wasn't moving properly. What was Emily doing? Breathing. Then less. Then.
He stopped.
Because the next word would close the gap between accident and death. She stopped, he said.
Simple.
Final. The room held that word.
Stopped.
Not unconscious. Not injured.
Gone.
And Clara? The detective asked. Reeves exhaled slowly. She stood up, he said, wiped her hands, looked at me again, and she said, now we have a problem. Not grief. Not shock. A problem. Managed.
Solved.
Controlled. What did you do? The detective asked. Reeves' hands trembled slightly now. The first visible crack in composure. I didn't know what to do, he said. I told her we needed to call someone. Police. Ambulance. Anyone. And she said?
No.
Immediate. Absolute. She said no one could know we were there, that if we called, everything would come back to us, that it would look like we planned it. And that fear, that calculation, took hold. She told me to help her, Reeves said. Help her do what? Another pause.
Long.
Heavy. Move her. The words settled into the room like a weight. Because this was the shift. From accident to concealment. You moved the body, the detective said. Reeves nodded. Slow. Reluctant. But undeniable. We wrapped her, he said. Used what we had. Old fabric. Plastic sheeting. Anything. Whose idea? A beat. Hers. Of course. She told me where to take her, Reeves continued. Said it had to be somewhere no one would connect. Somewhere temporary. Temporary. 16 years. Buried. Forgotten. Why bury her with a key? The detective asked suddenly. The question cut through everything. Sharp. Precise. Because that detail didn't fit. Not with panic. Not with fear. Reeves looked up. Confused for a moment. Then something shifted again. I didn't, he said. This time, it didn't sound like a reflex. It sounded different. uncertain. You're saying Clara did? The detective pressed. Reeves hesitated. I don't remember putting it there, he said. Careful. Measured. But not solid. Did she have it? The detective asked. Reeves thought. Really thought. And that hesitation, that real search for memory, was new. She might have, he said slowly. Why? I don't know. But that wasn't true. Not entirely. Because something about that key, something about its placement, wasn't random. It was intentional. And intention leaves patterns. Patterns that don't disappear. Not even after 16 years. So you buried her, the detective said. Reeves nodded. And then? Another breath. Another shift. We left, he said.
Just like that.
As if it could end there. As if walking away could seal what had been done. But it didn't. It never does. Because the ground remembers. The body remembers. And, eventually, the truth forces its way back up.
Piece by piece.
Bone by bone. Until there's nothing left to hide behind. And now, sitting in that room, with every word pulling him deeper, Daniel Reeves was no longer holding the story together. He was unraveling it. And at the center of it all, still untouched, still unaccounted for, was Clara. Watching. Waiting. Or already gone. The name didn't sit quietly in the file. It spread. From a single line in an interview room to every desk, every screen, every active unit assigned to the reopened case. Clara Whitmore was no longer a colleague in the background of Emily Carter's life. She was now central, essential, a presence that had been missed, overlooked, allowed to disappear into the margins 16 years earlier. That mistake would not happen again. Within hours, her name was run through every available system: employment records, tax filings, national insurance, banking, travel, medical registrations, electoral rolls. Every trace a person leaves behind when they exist in a system built to track them. And for a moment, it looked simple. Clara Whitmore, born 1971.
Teacher.
Employed at the same primary school as Emily Carter in 2003. Address on file. Phone number long inactive. Nothing unusual. Until 2004. That was where the trail broke. No updated employment. No tax activity. No medical visits. No registered address. No digital footprint. She didn't move. She vanished. Not dramatically. Not violently.
Just gone.
As if she had stepped out of the system and never looked back. Detectives didn't call it coincidence. They called it intention. Back in the interview room, Daniel Reeves sat under the same lights, the same silence pressing in around him, but now the focus had shifted.
He was no longer the center of the case.
He was the bridge. And they were about to cross it. Where is she? One detective asked. Reeves didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed somewhere distant, somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the present. Somewhere that still held her voice, her instructions, her control. I don't know, he said finally. It wasn't convincing. Not because it sounded rehearsed. Because it sounded incomplete. You helped her bury a body, the detective said. You lived with that for 16 years. You expect us to believe you never spoke again. A pause. Then,
we didn't, Reeves said.
Too clean. Too absolute. Not once, the detective pressed. Reeves shook his head.
No.
The detectives let that sit. Then reached for something else. A timeline. Laid out in front of him. March 2003. Emily disappears. March 2003. B-17 payment made. March 2003. Body concealed. 2004. Clara Whitmore disappears from every system. Explain that, the detective said. Reeves looked at it. Longer this time. Because now the gap was visible. Obvious. Impossible to ignore. She said she might leave, he said quietly. When? After everything. What did she mean by leave? Reeves hesitated. Start over. Somewhere else.
No specifics.
No country. No plan. Just a direction.
Away.
And you believed that was the end? The detective asked. I didn't think I had a choice, Reeves replied. That line again. Control shifting outward. Responsibility slipping. But it wasn't enough anymore. You always have a choice, the detective said. You chose silence. Reeves didn't argue. Because there was nothing left to defend. The investigation moved fast. Clara's old address was visited first. A narrow flat in a quiet block, unchanged on the outside, but inside, stripped of anything useful. The current tenant had moved in years after she left. No memory. No records beyond a standard lease transfer. Neighbors remembered little. She kept to herself. Didn't socialize much. Quiet. Always quiet. Always controlled. But one detail surfaced. A man in the adjacent flat. Older now, memory fading, but something stuck. She had visitors, he said. What kind of visitors? Not many, but regular. Same person. A man. Daniel Reeves, the detective asked. The man nodded slowly.
Yes.
That's him. So they had met before. More than once. More than casually. You said you didn't know Emily well, the detective later reminded Reeves. Reeves didn't answer. Because the truth was closing in again. They expanded outward. School records. Staff interviews. Archived communications. 16 years had blurred memories, but patterns remained. Clara Whitmore had not been just another teacher. She had been precise. Disciplined. Respected. But distant. Always distant. No close friendships. No social presence.
No obvious connections.
Except one. Emily Carter. Not best friends. Not inseparable. But connected enough to share schedules, meetings, quiet conversations in staff rooms where no one listens closely enough to remember later. And then there were the reports. Small things.
Dismissed at the time.
Emily arriving late once or twice in the weeks before she vanished. Unusual for her. A comment made to a colleague. She feels watched sometimes. That detail had been written down, then ignored. Now it mattered. Because it matched Reeves' story. Or at least
part of it.
But the question remained. Who was watching? And why did Clara insert herself into that fear? The answer didn't come from people. It came from paper. Old documents.
Archived.
Forgotten. Until now. A request filed in early 2003. A transfer application. Clara Whitmore. Requesting relocation.
Urgent.
Reason listed as personal.
Denied. No explanation.
No follow-up. But the timing. It aligned.
Perfectly.
Weeks before Emily disappeared. Weeks before everything escalated. Detectives dug deeper. Financial records.
Sparse.
But not empty. Before she vanished, Clara had withdrawn large amounts of cash over several weeks. Structured. Careful. Not enough to trigger alerts, but enough to sustain movement. Enough to leave.
Prepared.
Not reactive.
Planned.
The pattern was clear. She had been preparing to disappear before Emily Carter ever stepped into that storage unit. Which meant whatever happened that night was not entirely spontaneous. Back in the interview room, the pressure returned. Stronger. Focused. She was leaving anyway, the detective said. Wasn't she? Reeves looked up.
Slowly.
She said she needed to, he replied. Why? A pause.
Long. Heavy.
She didn't feel safe, he said. The same words. The same fear.
But now.
Turned inside out. From who? The detective asked. Reeves hesitated. Then shook his head. She never said. But something in his voice suggested he knew more. Not everything, but enough. She used Emily, the detective said. The statement hung there.
Sharp.
Unavoidable. She used her fear.
Turned it.
Controlled it. Brought her to you. To that unit. Reeves' expression tightened. Because that version, that framing, felt closer to the truth than anything he had said so far. She said it would be quick, he repeated. Not as justification. As realization. She knew, the detective said quietly. Before it happened. Silence. But this time, it wasn't resistance. It was acceptance creeping in. Because the more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Clara Whitmore hadn't just been there. She had been ahead. One step. Maybe more. And now, she was gone. Off the map. 16 years of absence.
No trace. No mistake.
Nothing. Which meant finding her wouldn't be simple. It would be a hunt. Across time. Across identities. Across a life deliberately erased. And somewhere in that erased life was the answer to everything. Why Emily? Why that night? Why the key? Because it didn't belong there. Not by accident. Not by panic. It was placed. Deliberately. A message. Or a mistake. And either way, it was the reason this case was no longer buried. The reason Daniel Reeves was sitting in that room. And the reason Clara Whitmore had just become the most wanted ghost in London. The ghost started to take shape in fragments. Not a face. Not a clear trail. Just pieces, misaligned, scattered across years that had been deliberately erased. Clara Whitmore was gone from the system, but absence leaves pressure marks. The kind that show up when you look sideways, when you stop searching for what's there and start asking what shouldn't be missing. The team split. One side stayed on Reeves, squeezing, testing, waiting for the moment he would stop protecting her and start protecting himself. The other side moved outward, chasing the negative space Clara left behind. Identity first. If she had planned to disappear, she needed a new name, a new life, something that could pass quietly through systems designed to notice everything. Records from 2003 were pulled again, passport applications, lost ID reports, name changes filed around the same window. Hundreds of possibilities. Most dead ends. But one anomaly surfaced. A replacement passport issued 3 weeks after Emily Carter vanished. Female. Similar age range. Application supported by secondary identification that had since been flagged in another, unrelated audit years later.
At the time, it had passed.
Now, under scrutiny, it looked engineered. The name on that passport: Helen Ward. No criminal record. No trace before 2003 that fully held. Fragments existed, but they didn't align cleanly. A school record here, a medical note there. Enough to construct a person on paper, but not enough to prove she had lived a continuous life.
A shell.
Built just strong enough to pass. Travel records showed a departure. April 2003. One way. No return logged. Destination:
Spain.
The room shifted again when the name came up on the board. Not confirmation. Not yet. But direction. Back in the interview room, Daniel Reeves watched the detectives more closely now. Not defensive, calculating. The kind of calculation that comes when someone realizes the distance they thought protected them is collapsing. "You knew she was leaving," one detective said. Reeves didn't answer. "You knew she had another identity." Silence. "You helped her," the detective added. A flicker.
There.
Gone almost instantly. But enough. "We have a passport issued under a different name," the detective continued. "Issued weeks after Emily died. Used once. Then nothing. That's not random." Reeves shifted. His fingers tightened again, then released. "I didn't make it," he said. Careful.
Specific.
"I didn't say you did," the detective replied. "But you knew." A pause. Reeves exhaled slowly. "She told me she had options," he said. "What kind of options?" "Places to go. People who could help." "Names." "I don't know them." That answer landed flat. Too convenient. Too empty. "You buried a body with her," the detective said. "You helped conceal a death. You expect us to believe she trusted you with that, but not with anything else." Reeves looked down. Because the logic held. "She didn't trust me," he said quietly. A shift. Subtle. But real. "Then why involve you at all?" the detective asked. Reeves hesitated. "She needed me." "For what?" Another pause. "For control." That word settled in the room. Because it aligned. Everything so far controlled.
Planned.
Measured. "You were the environment," the detective said. "The space. The access. The place where it could happen." Reeves didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to deny. "She chose you," the detective continued. "Not randomly. Not accidentally. She knew what you would do." That hit. Harder than anything before. Because it wasn't about what happened. It was about why him. Reeves' expression shifted again. Something sharper now. Something closer to anger than fear. "I didn't know," he said. The first real pushback in minutes. "You didn't want to know," the detective corrected. Silence.
Then the board changed. Spain. Barcelona. Valencia. Madrid.
Cities where someone could disappear without vanishing completely. Places where records exist, but not always cleanly. Where identity can be adjusted, reshaped, softened at the edges until it no longer matches what it once was. Helen Ward. If that was her. If the passport was real. If the trail hadn't been deliberately fractured again. Requests were sent. Interpol notifications. Local authorities looped in. Old immigration data pulled. Airline manifests cross-referenced. And then, a hit. Not recent. Not current. but real. 2006. A woman using the name Helen Ward had registered for temporary residency in Valencia. Documentation light, but accepted. Employment listed as private tutoring. No long-term address recorded. After that, nothing. Again.
Gone.
But this time, there was a photograph. Low resolution. Taken for administrative records. But enough. The team gathered around the screen. Compared it to Clara Whitmore's old staff photo. Aging accounted for. Hair different. Expression altered. But the structure. The eyes. The way the face held tension. It aligned. Not perfectly, but closely enough to push forward. Back in the room, Reeves watched the screen as they turned it toward him. "Is this her?" the detective asked. Reeves looked. Really looked. Longer than before. Because this was a memory now. This was confrontation. Time layered over itself. 16 years collapsing into a single image. His jaw tightened. Then, a nod.
Small.
Reluctant. But undeniable. "Yes," he said. And just like that, the ghost had a face again. Older.
Changed.
But real. Clara Whitmore hadn't disappeared. She had transformed. And for the first time since 2003, she was visible. The investigation accelerated. Valencia records pulled in full. Rental agreements. Utility traces. Financial movement. Sparse, but not empty. Patterns began to emerge. Short stays. Cash transactions. No fixed employment. Always moving. Always just ahead of permanence. Like someone who knew exactly how long they could stay before becoming visible. Before becoming traceable. And then, another shift. A different name. Used once. Then abandoned. But linked.
Subtly. Carefully.
To the same woman. This wasn't escape. It was evolution. Layered identities. Controlled transitions. A life built on disappearance. And now, that life was starting to crack. Because one thing had changed.
The key.
Buried with Emily. Left behind.
A mistake.
Or a message. Either way, it had brought everything back. Back to London. Back to that night. Back to Daniel Reeves. And now, back to her. Because if Clara Whitmore, if Helen Ward, if whoever she had become, thought the past was buried, she was wrong. It was moving again. Closer. Faster. And this time, it wasn't going to stop. The pattern wasn't random.
It only looked that way from a distance.
Short stays. Cash payments. Names that changed just enough to avoid repetition but never enough to draw attention. A rhythm hidden inside movement. 3 to 6 months in one place, then gone. Always before documents needed renewal. Always before neighbors started asking questions. Clara Whitmore hadn't vanished. She had refined herself into something harder to detect. A person who existed only in intervals. And now, those intervals were closing in on a single point. Valencia had been the first anchor, 2006, the earliest confirmed reappearance under the name Helen Ward. After that, fragments surfaced across southern Europe. A temporary lease in Alicante. A tutoring registration in Seville. A utility account in Marseille that lasted exactly 92 days before being terminated in cash. Each trace thin. Each one incomplete. But together, They formed a map. Not of where she lived, but how she moved. And the pattern was tightening, because the last confirmed trace wasn't in Spain. It was closer. Much closer. 2018. A short-term rental agreement in East London. Different name. Different documentation. But the same structure. The same controlled footprint. The same deliberate absence of permanence. For the first time in 16 years, she had come back. The room shifted when that detail landed. Not outward. Inward. Because distance had been the one thing protecting her. And now, that distance was gone. Why would she return? One detective asked. No one answered immediately. Because the answer mattered. More than anything else. People who build new lives don't go back. Not without a reason. Not without a risk they're willing to take. Something pulled her back, another voice said quietly. Or someone. Back in the interview room, Daniel Reeves sat straighter now. Not relaxed, not comfortable, but alert in a different way, as if something in the investigation had crossed an invisible boundary he thought was permanent. You knew she came back, the detective said. Reeves' eyes flickered. A fraction of a second. Enough. You knew, the detective repeated. Reeves exhaled.
Slow.
Measured. I thought I saw her, he said. The words landed softly. But they carried weight. When? The detective asked. A few years ago, Reeves replied. Not close.
Just passing.
On the street. Did you speak to her?
No.
Did she see you? A pause. Yes. That changed everything. Because if she saw him, she knew. She knew the past still existed.
She knew the risk.
And she didn't run? The detective asked. Reeves hesitated.
No, he said.
Why? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't think she was afraid of me. That answer sat heavy. Because it suggested something deeper. Not just control in the past, but confidence in the present. She trusted you to stay silent, the detective said. Reeves didn't respond, but his silence agreed. The timeline shifted again. 2018. Clara, under another name, returns to London. Sees Reeves. Doesn't approach. Doesn't disappear immediately.
Stays. Why?
The team dug into the East London rental. Short-term flat. Paid in advance.
Cash.
Minimal documentation. But one thing slipped through. A maintenance request. Filed under the alias. Time-stamped. And attached. A phone number. Burner. Inactive now. But not empty. Call records pulled.
Sparse.
Mostly dead numbers. Except one. Repeated. Over 3 weeks. A single contact. Always brief. Always under 2 minutes. Then nothing. The number traced back. Not to a person, but to a place. A public phone booth. One that no longer existed. Removed in 2019, but archived in city infrastructure logs. Location. Less than a mile from where Emily Carter had lived. Less than a mile from where she had vanished. The circle was closing. Not metaphorically. Physically. She came back to the origin, one detective said. Not to hide. To revisit.
Or to finish something.
Back in a room, Reeves watched as the map was laid out in front of him. Old locations. New ones. lines connecting them, patterns emerging. This isn't random movement, the detective said. This is design. Reeves' expression tightened, because now the investigation wasn't chasing her. It was understanding her. And that was more dangerous. You said she needed control, the detective continued. This is control. Every move, every identity, every disappearance. Reeves nodded faintly. She doesn't make mistakes, he said. The words came out automatically, as if he had believed them for years. But the detective leaned in. She did once. A beat. The key. Reeves looked at it again. On the table. Still there.
Small. Silent.
But louder than anything else in the room. That wasn't random, the detective said. People like her don't forget things. They don't leave evidence behind by accident. Reeves didn't answer. Because that thought, that possibility, had been there before. Buried. Ignored. Now it was back. What if it wasn't a mistake, the detective said. The room stilled. What if she wanted it found? Reeves' eyes lifted slowly. Because that idea, that shifted everything. Why would she do that, he asked. Not defensive. Not denying. Asking. Because now. He didn't understand her anymore. Think about it, the detective said. 16 years of silence. Perfect control. And then she returns. Close to the original site. Leaves a trail. A number. A connection. Reeves' breathing slowed. Because the pieces were aligning in a way that didn't match the version of her he had held on to. She didn't run, the detective continued. She stayed long enough to be seen. Long enough to make contact. Indirectly. Reeves shook his head slightly.
No, he said.
But it wasn't conviction. It was resistance. She's not careless, he added. No, the detective agreed. She's not. A beat. That's why this matters. The implication hung there.
Clear.
Heavy. If the key wasn't a mistake, then it was a signal. And signals have direction. Meaning. Purpose. Who is she calling? The detective asked. Reeves didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Or didn't want to. Who is she meeting? The detective pressed. Silence. Again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of something building. Something close. Because the closer they got, the less this looked like a past crime being solved. And the more it looked like something unfinished. Something that had been waiting. For the right moment. For the right trigger. For the right person to start digging again. The key had done that. The bones had done that. But maybe that was the point. And if it was, then Clara Whitmore wasn't just hiding. She was watching. Waiting. And now, the investigation wasn't just chasing her past. It was stepping directly into whatever she had been preparing next. Because patterns don't just end. They resolve. And this one was almost complete. The pattern didn't just point forward. It pointed inward. Back to London. Back to the origin. Back to the exact radius where everything had begun. Emily Street, the storage unit, the quiet corridors of a school where two lives had overlapped just enough for something to take root and turn lethal. Now, for the first time, the investigation stopped chasing the past and started anticipating the present. Because if Clara Whitmore had returned, and the evidence said she had, then she wasn't just revisiting history. She was completing something. The question was what? Surveillance teams moved in quietly. No press.
No leaks. No visible eskelasjen.
The area around the old phone booth site was mapped again. Updated infrastructure. New buildings layered over old footprints. Streets that had shifted just enough to hide what used to be obvious. But the distance hadn't changed. Less than a mile. Always less than a mile. A boundary. A comfort zone. Or a constraint she had imposed on herself. Cameras were rechecked, modern systems now sharper, wider, persistent. Weeks of footage pulled, filtered, scanned for recurring figures, repeated paths, anomalies in movement that didn't match the rhythm of daily life. And then, a face. Not clear. Not perfect. But consistent. A woman appearing at irregular intervals across multiple cameras. Never lingering. Never repeating the same route twice in a row. But always within the same geographic pocket. Same posture. Same controlled pace. Head slightly lowered, not to hide, but to avoid attention. The kind of movement that blends. Unless you're looking for it. They tracked her across days. Then weeks. A pattern began to emerge, not in where she went, but in when. Late afternoons. Early evenings. Transition hours. Moments when streets are neither full nor empty, when visibility is high but attention is low. Smart. Deliberate. And then came the pivot. A camera near a small grocery shop picked her up at 17:42. She entered. Exited 3 minutes later. Paid in cash.
No conversación.
But the camera inside caught something else. Her hand. As she reached into her pocket. A scar. Thin. Linear. Running along the base of her thumb.
Old.
Healed. But distinctive. The team froze the frame.
Zoomed. Compared.
Back in the file, 2003, there was a note. Minor. Overlooked. Clara Whitmore observed with a small cut on her right hand during initial questioning. It hadn't mattered then.
Now.
It mattered. They brought the image into the interview room. Placed it in front of Daniel Reeves. Is this her? The detective asked. Reeves leaned forward. Closer than before. Closer than he had ever allowed himself to get to anything in this case. He stared at the image.
The grain.
The blur. The imperfect capture of a life that had refused to be seen. Then, his eyes locked on the hand. The scar. Recognition didn't come slowly. It hit. Yes, he said.
No hesitación.
No doubt. That's her. The room shifted instantly. Because confirmation changed everything. This wasn't theory anymore. This wasn't reconstruction. Clara Whitmore, or whatever name she was using now, was here. Present. Moving. And for the first time in 16 years. Reachable. The operation escalated. Quietly.
Carefully.
Surveillance widened, but remained invisible. Plainclothes officers rotated in and out of the area, blending into the same rhythm she used to hide. Patterns were tracked in real time now, her movement no longer abstract, no longer historical. She walked. Everywhere. No vehicle. No fixed route. But always within that radius. Always returning. Like orbit. And then, the first direct opportunity. 1906. A narrow street just off the main road. The camera picks her up again. Clear this time. Face partially visible. Enough. Units were already in position. Not coincidence. Preparation. Hold, came the instruction.
No rus. No mistake.
They had waited 16 years. They could wait minutes. She walked past the camera.
Turned left.
Then right. Then slowed. Just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for the team watching live.
She's aware, someone said.
Because that change, that subtle shift, meant something. She felt it. Not saw it. Felt it. The pressure. The difference. The environment no longer neutral. And then she stopped. Mid-step. Just for a fraction of a second. Then continued. But something had changed. The rhythm. The control. It tightened. She knows, another voice said. The command came fast. Move. Units closed in. Not running. Not drawing attention. Just closing space. Angles converging. Distance collapsing. She turned again. Another corner. Faster now. Not panicked. But precise. Calculated. Adapting. She's heading east. Cut her off at the junction. Unit 3, hold position. The net tightened. Street by street. Second by second. Until she stopped again. This time longer. And then she turned. Not away.
Toward them.
Deliberately. Like she had been expecting this moment. Like the chase had been part of the design. The officer slowed. Because something about that movement, that choice, felt wrong. Not fear. Not surprise. Something else. Recognition. She stood still. Hands visible. Face calm.
Composed.
16 years of absence reduced to a single moment on a London street that had never forgotten. Clara Whitmore, one officer said, voice steady. No response. Just that same expression. Controlled. Unreadable. Stay where you are. She didn't move.
Didn't resist.
Didn't run. Because running had never been the plan. Not anymore. Not this time. You're under arrest, the officer continued. And for the first time, a reaction. Not panic. Not denial. A small shift in her expression. Something close to acknowledgement. As if the words were not unexpected. As if they were overdue. The cuffs went on without resistance.
No struggle.
No attempt to escape. Because the moment had already happened. Long before the officers closed in. Back in the vehicle, as the door shut and the city moved past outside, she finally spoke. One sentence. Quiet. Measured. You took your time. The words landed like a cold echo of everything that had come before. Because this wasn't the end of a chase. It was the beginning of something else. Something deeper. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. And now, Clara Whitmore was no longer a ghost. She was real. She was here. And she was finally going to talk. The room felt different with her in it. Not louder, not colder, just sharper. Like every surface had been honed to an edge the moment Clara Whitmore sat down and placed her hands flat on the table, fingers relaxed, posture straight, eyes steady.
No hesitación. No confusión.
No sign of a woman who had just been arrested after 16 years of disappearance. She didn't look like someone caught. She looked like someone who had arrived. Across from her, the detectives didn't rush to speak. They had learned that with people like Daniel Reeves, silence creates pressure. But with Clara, silence was space. And she knew how to use it. So they filled it. Clara Whitmore, one detective began, voice level, controlled. You've been identified in connection with the death of Emily Carter in March 2003. No reaction. Not even a blink. You've been off the grid since 2004. Multiple identities. Multiple countries. You came back to London in 2018. Still nothing. Do you want to explain that? A pause. Not long. Measured. Then, you already have your explanation, she said.
Her voice was calm.
Even. Not defensive. Not aggressive. Just certain. The tone shifted immediately. Because this wasn't going to be like Reeves. There would be no cracks to widen. No panic to exploit. Everything here would be intentional. We have a statement from Daniel Reeves, the detective said. That landed. Not visibly. But something behind her eyes tightened. Just slightly. He says you were there that night. Clara tilted her head a fraction. Of course I was, she said.
No denial. No hesitation.
Just confirmation. And he says you pushed her. Silence. But not empty.
Processing.
Reframing. Then.
He would say that, she replied.
A deflection.
Clean.
Controlled. You were the one who brought Emily to that unit, the detective pressed. Clara's gaze didn't shift. She trusted me, she said. The words came out almost softly. Not defensive. Not proud. Just factual. And you used that, the detective said. A pause. Longer this time. Then. I managed it, Clara replied. The distinction was deliberate. Used implies harm. Managed implies control. Structure. Purpose. Managed what? The detective asked. Her fear. The answer was immediate. Too immediate. She believed someone was watching her, Clara continued. I redirected that. Redirected. Not created. Not exploited. Reframed. You made her believe she wasn't safe, the detective said. Clara shook her head once. No, she said. She already believed that. Then why take her to a storage unit? Another pause. Because now. They were closer. To isolate variables, Clara said. The room tightened. Because that wasn't language of panic. Or accident. It was method. Cold. Analytical. Variables, the detective repeated. Environment. Stimulus.
Response, she said.
She was escalating. I needed to understand the trigger. The detectives exchanged a glance. Because now. This wasn't just about a confrontation that got out of control. This was something else. Something constructed. You were studying her, one of them said. Clara didn't respond. But she didn't deny it. And when she tried to leave, she disrupted the process, Clara said.
Flat.
Detached. The word process hung in the air like something toxic. You pushed her, the detective said again. Clara leaned back slightly. Not defensive. Repositioning.
She lost balance, she said.
That's not what Reeves said. A flicker.
There. Small. Sharp.
Reeves doesn't understand cause and effect, Clara replied. The dismissal was immediate.
Precise. Calculated.
You're saying it was an accident, the detective said. Clara considered that. Then, no, she said. The word landed hard. Because it wasn't what they expected. Then what are you saying? The detective asked. Another pause. Measured. I'm saying it was inevitable. The room went still. Because inevitability removes choice. Removes responsibility. Turns action into outcome. You created that situation, the detective said. Clara didn't deny it. You controlled the environment. You brought her there. You blocked the exit. Yes. The admission was clean. Unfiltered. And she ended up dead. Yes.
No hesitation. No emotion.
Just fact. And after that? Another shift. Because this was where concealment begins. We stabilized the outcome, Clara said. Not we panicked. Not we hid. Stabilized. Reframed again. You mean you covered it up, the detective said. Clara didn't correct him. But she didn't agree either.
Reeves assisted, she said.
The responsibility placed.
Shared.
But not owned. You told him what to do, the detective pressed. A slight tilt of her head. Direction was necessary, she said.
Control again.
Always control. You buried her, the detective said. Yes. The word dropped into the room like a final piece clicking into place. And the key, the detective asked. For the first time. A real pause. Longer than any before. Because this detail, this one detail, didn't fit cleanly into her structure. It remained, she said finally. Remained where? With her. Why? Another pause. Not hesitation. Selection. Choosing how much to reveal. It was no longer useful, she said. The answer was too clean. Too simple. And wrong. People like you don't leave things behind, the detective said quietly. Clara's eyes shifted slightly. Not away.
Deeper.
As if reassessing. You think this is about forgetting, she said. A beat. It isn't. The room tightened again. Because now, they were stepping into her logic, her framework. You left it on purpose, the detective said. Not a question. A statement. Clara didn't respond immediately. But something changed. A shift so small, it could almost be missed. But it was there. Yes, she said. The word was quiet, but absolute. Why? The detective asked. And for the first time, there was something behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not fear. Not regret. Something else. Something closer to anticipation. Because unresolved systems destabilize over time, she said. The words were precise. Almost rehearsed. But only if they're reactivated. The detectives didn't interrupt. Because now, this was the center. The reason. You wanted it found, the detective said. Clara's gaze held steady. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. And you came back to London? Yes. To watch it happen. A pause. Then. Yes. The room went completely still. Because the case. The bones. The key. The arrest. It hadn't just uncovered her. It had followed a path she set. 16 years earlier. You planned this, the detective said. Clara didn't deny it. Because denial wasn't part of her structure. I initiated it, she said. A subtle difference. But a critical one. And now, the detective asked. Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Because this was the end of the line. Or the beginning of something else. Clara looked at the table. At the key. Then back up. And for the first time, her expression shifted. Not much. But enough. To see what you would do with it, she said. And just like that, the case wasn't just solved. It was completed. Exactly the way she had intended. The case didn't end when she confessed. It settled. Like dust after a collapse. Thick, slow, unavoidable. Every piece of it hanging in the air, refusing to disappear, coating everything it touched with the weight of what had been uncovered. Clara Whitmore sat in the same room, under the same light, hands still resting calmly on the table, as if nothing about the last 16 years had been chaotic or hidden or violent. As if every step had unfolded exactly as it was supposed to. Because, to her, it had. Across the table, the detectives didn't feel victory. They felt displacement. Because solving a case is supposed to bring closure. It's supposed to restore order, to take something broken and lock it into a frame that makes sense. But this didn't feel restored. It felt completed. On her terms. You engineered this, one detective said quietly. Not a question. A recognition. Clara didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. The evidence had already spoken. The body, buried just far enough to disappear, but not far enough to be lost forever. The key, placed deliberately beneath the remains, sealed into the earth like a time-release mechanism. The return to London, the controlled exposure, the pattern just visible enough to be followed. None of it random. None of it accidental. A design. You waited 16 years, the detective continued. Why that long? Clara's eyes shifted slightly, not away, but inward, as if recalibrating the question into something more precise. Time stabilizes noise, she said. The answer came without hesitation. Emotional variables decay. Memory weakens. Systems reset. When you reactivate something after that period, the response is cleaner. Cleaner. The word hung in the room like a contradiction. Because nothing about this was clean. Not the fall. Not the silence. Not the burial. But to her, it was. You wanted to see if we'd find it, the detective said. Yes. And if we didn't? Another pause. Short. Calculated. Then it would remain contained. Contained. Like it had been all those years. Sealed. Silent. Untouched. You weren't afraid of being caught, the detective said. Clara looked at him directly. No. The simplicity of it cut deeper than anything else. Why? He asked. And this time, there was something else in her expression. Not emotion, but something close to curiosity. Because this isn't about avoiding consequences, she said. It's about observing outcomes. The room shifted again. Because that statement reframed everything. Not a crime hidden. A system tested. A variable introduced. A result observed over time. Emily Carter wasn't just a victim in her mind. She was part of a process. A sequence. A chain of cause and effect that Clara had constructed, initiated, then left dormant until it was ready to be activated again. You let a woman die, the detective said. Clara didn't react. She died, Clara corrected. The distinction landed hard. Because it removed intent, responsibility, everything that makes a human action accountable. You created the conditions, the detective said. Yes.
No denial. No hesitation.
And then you walked away. Yes. And came back to watch. Another pause. Then. Yes. The repetition built something in the room that couldn't be ignored. Not tension. Something heavier. Because every answer closed a door that should have remained open. Every admission removed a layer of doubt, but replaced it with something worse. Understanding. Not empathy. Understanding. And that was harder to carry. The case moved quickly after that. Formal charges. Forensic confirmations. A timeline rebuilt with precision that hadn't been possible in 2003. Every gap filled. Every uncertainty replaced with structure, clarity, finality. Daniel Reeves was charged alongside her.
Accessory. Concealment. Participation.
His silence had extended the life of the crime. Her design had defined it. In court, the narrative unfolded in controlled sequence. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Structured.
Just like she had described.
The fall. The impact. The decision not to call for help. The movement of the body. The burial.
The key.
Each piece placed into evidence exactly as it had been placed into the ground. Deliberate. Measured. Irreversible. The courtroom reacted the way people do when faced with something they can't fully process: shock, anger, disbelief. But Clara didn't react. She listened.
Watched.
As if the entire process was simply the final phase of something she had already completed years before. When the verdict came, guilty, there was no visible shift in her. No relief.
No collapse.
No resistance. Because the outcome had never been the point. The process had. And it had run its course. Outside, the city moved the same way it always had. Traffic. Voices. Footsteps echoing along streets that held more history than anyone passing through them would ever know. Emily Carter's name returned to headlines. Cold case solved. Hidden evidence leads to arrest. 16-year mystery ends. But those headlines didn't capture it. Not really. Because the case didn't end. It settled. Into the memory of the city. Into the space between what people think they understand and what actually happens when control, intention, and silence align long enough to create something that survives time. Back in South London, the street where it began looked the same. Curtains.
Brick.
Morning light spilling across pavement that had never revealed what it had witnessed.
No marquer.
No sign. Just the echo of something that had once happened there. A dull, hollow sound. 2:17 a.m. A moment swallowed by the night. Until it wasn't. Because some things don't stay buried. Not forever. Not when they've been placed with purpose. Not when they've been waiting. And, in the end, the case wasn't solved by chance. It wasn't broken open by luck. It was uncovered exactly the way it had been designed to be.
Piece by piece.
Step by step. Until there was nothing left hidden. Nothing left silent. Nothing left to do. But listen to what had always been there. Waiting.